Hey everybody, welcome back once again to the Dancing SOBR podcast. We have a really good episode for you. But first, I would like to thank our sponsors, of course. So I want to say thank you very much to Movita Juice Bar. Go to movitajuicebar.com and check out some of the stuff they have. You could find their locations on there, and you could also order through your food apps like Uber Eats. Look for Movita Juice Bar, movitajuicebar.com. I want to give a big shout out to our other sponsor, Picaresca Cafe. Picaresca Cafe is a small coffee shop over in Boyle Heights on Soto near the Sears building. Check them out. You can find them on Instagram at picaresca.cafe. They are also the roasters of the new coffee blend here. This is the one from Chiapas. You can now get it on our website, on my website, rafa.la/shop. We enjoy a really good cup of this during the interview today, and I hope you enjoy it. Today's guest is LA-based mixed media artist Oscar Magallanes. What's up, everybody? Welcome, and you're going to be joining us for the first pour of coffee here. Welcome back to the Dancing SOBR podcast, and today in the studio we have artist, sculptor, muralist, homie from the block, Oscar Magallanes. Oscar, welcome. Let me pour some coffee for you.
Orale.
Man, I hope this shit is good, because
See how good of an actor I am if it's not.
yeah. No, I'm sure it is. This is that Picaresca coffee. They rock it. I didn't offer you any creamer or anything, but so salud.
Salud.
And thanks for being on the show.
No, of course. Thanks for inviting.
Oh, that's good. Little fruity, como dicen. Oh yeah.
It's like a coffee commercial now.
Yeah. I know. I gotta get those first tastes in. All right. So what's up, bro?
What's up?
It's been a minute.
Yeah.
You're a busy man.
I stay busy.
Yeah. So, like we do here, we like to, start with, like some of the history about you, where you come from, where you were born. And so let's just talk about like where you're from, where did you grow up and all that.
Orale. I grew up in San Gabriel Valley. So was born in Duarte, grew up in Azusa, went to school in Covina. But yeah, that was my upbringing. I really, those formative years were spent in the barrio in Azusa.
Yeah.
That area has changed a lot. Really got gentrified. A lot of the, like Azusa Pacific University pushing into the neighborhood. And then it was the same thing that happened in a lot of communities where heavy-handed kind of criminalization, what would they call it? The hammer of the code, right?
Wow.
Condemning houses, not allowing for multifamily homes, things of that sort, right? And so, went through all that. Luckily enough, Azusa didn't have competing neighborhoods. It was just pretty much, one gang that ran everything, and everybody was related. Everybody knew each other. So, we didn't go through a lot of like the drive-bys or, stuff like that. But we still, there was still all the problems that came with what was going on in the 80s, right? There was a reason why they called it the decade of death, right? So even if you weren't,
was the 80s or the 90s? Sometimes.
Well, it was in between, right? I think it's from like 84 to 94.
Yeah.
So it isn't like 80 to 90, but we all remember the crack epidemic, and if we're older, we remember all that is.
Are you around my age? I'm 50.
I'm a bit younger.
Okay.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, but we remember all that.
Yeah, the same years growing up. Yeah, because it's a trip. Us that grew up during all that and saw like all the drive-bys and everything, and then seeing younger kids now. I don't know how to explain like the feeling that I get when I see this stuff still on the news, still happening, and I don't know where I'm going.
It cycles, right? And things that I always say is that things simultaneously get better and worse, right? Like the violence is at an all-time low, even though it's going back up. But that violence is nowhere near what it was back then. I mean, it was just constantly people being killed.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember seeing someone get shot, and it was a common occurrence. We knew that when we were going out, we were taking our lives into our own hands, and we still would go out because we were hard.
Because that's what we did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd go to parties and there'd be shootings at party, and next Friday you're out.
Yeah.
At a party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but yeah, that was basically what I grew up around, and all that, ends up taking its toll. You know, either you kind of just keep your head down, and I mean, there was all the cliques back then, right? Like you're either into sports or you're into your car, whatever it is, right? When you have cousins and uncles and stuff that are living that life, it rubs off on you.
Yeah.
And I think we all have those family members that rest in peace, or wherever they are. So many of them have been locked up for a long time, or were locked up, or end up in mental institutions.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that's something that we're talking a little bit about right now.
Yeah.
Just things that have to do with mental health, things that go unaddressed, and the way that people act out, react, lack of funding for anything that has to do with diagnosing, services in the community, all these things that have to do with systemic racism, really.
And also the lack of not wanting to find out or not wanting to go to a doctor.
Well, I mean, there's that history of being blown off too, right? Like where we know something's serious, and I talk about this with my partner who works in the mental health field, who's amazing. But what is it? There's a deeply ingrained sense of mistrust of institutions, and rightly so. Where we're made to feel as if we're crazy or dumb or exaggerating, right? Especially when it comes to women and really what it has to do with not just mental health, but any kind of health wise, as far as saying that BIPOC women are exaggerate. And this is something that was literally taught. We have these conversations as far as knowing that when it's really the opposite. If you don't have health care, then you're only going to go when it's really something serious. But you have a lot of white male doctors, until recently we're teaching that if you're Black or Latina, you're probably exaggerating the symptoms. But anyways, and there's a lot of things that I mean, we could go run the full gamut of that, but growing up amongst that, I was put into a private school because there was some violence that went on, and my parents pulled us out of. Well, I never went to public school. I mean, I did after middle school, but there was some things going on where my sisters got put into private school, and then I ended up going to the same school, which I thought was terrible. We're the poor Mexicans in this school with these uppity Hispanics. And I would have constantly be getting into fights with like the richest kid in school. It was just, I didn't like people being picked on.
Because Azusa's right next to like some very affluent cities, right?
Yes, these fools were from Glendora, and back then, the cops would really keep us in our place if we couldn't even ride our bikes into that city. And Covina, I mean, it's that whole suburban thing, but yeah, Glendora was very much an affluent neighborhood. So we had people from that area coming into the private school. But yeah, so that whole time I was in school, it turns out I had a learning disability that never got diagnosed, so I got treated as if I was dumb. And I couldn't wait to just get out of that school. And then I ended up in a public school for high school, and then I realized how terrible that school was. Where I was getting D's and C's. I was acing my classes in high school. So it turns out I wasn't as dumb as they were making me believe, and turns out the public schools were a lot worse. But I would finish my work very quickly because it was remedial for me, but they wouldn't move me up because they would look at my grades and say, well, you were getting C's and D's, even though it was stuff I'd covered years earlier,
Mhm.
and I was acing everything. So then they, instead of moving me into advanced classes, they put me in remedial classes. They had really what was like the screw up classes, where they would just be like, we're gonna throw everybody with any kind of issues there, and
The peleoneros.
yeah, and it really was like, yo, okay, ADHD, maybe some PTSD, like all these different things that where people were acting out. They put them all in one class, right? And so that's where I ended up, and I ended up hating school. To this day, I'm just like, it was such a joke as far as that. And by the time I was 15, I was kicked out of school. I just started.
But how were you kicked out? What happened?
So there's all kinds of stuff.
They were just like, we don't want this vato here no more. Or?
Nah, like that first year, I just started getting into a lot of stuff because, I was being treated the way I was being treated, and then sticking me in where.
Oh, so you started getting into arguments and fights, and
not so much, but
anti-authority.
Just there was a lot of bad things going on, and then there was all kinds of stuff going on with the family that then rolled into things that were just crazy when I look back at them, as far as beef with people that ended up, it was serious things that were happening. And there was violence, and there was fights, and there was all these different things. But long story short, I ended up getting kicked out of school. But then, luckily enough, there was somebody on my expulsion hearing, Nancy Moore, who was the assistant superintendent of the district, and she kind of took me under her wing and made sure I went back to school. And I'm very grateful, because that who knows what would have happened if this person didn't. They helped a lot of people. Nancy Moore has really tried to look out for a lot of Chicanos and Latinos that had a lot of issues, and it didn't always work out well. Unfortunately, because there's all these other factors outside of just the education system. There's things going on at home. There's things, again, with criminalization, all these different things that were going on. But then, luckily enough, to this point, I hadn't been able to get any art classes, right? Even though I was
going to say, so going through all this, when did the art start? Like, how did you?
I just never stopped doing art since I was a kid.
Oh, so this was something you picked up when you were a kid. Yeah.
I was always. I mean, everybody does art. Who doesn't start making marks when they're kids, right? Like, when you look at the history of humanity, like, that's how we trace back humans, right? Is like all these cave paintings, all these like rock cliffs. We've never not done that, right? And we have to have this entire system put in place to tell us that we're not artists, right? Or tell us what art is, to then make us stop drawing. And to me, I just never stopped, and I always knew that I was just gonna do art. And the more people would tell me.
So, but when you were young, like, at what age did you start saying, like, I'm an artist, I want to do art?
I have no idea where I got this from, but I know that ever since I was young, I would say I was gonna be a famous artist. And I don't even know where I got the whole famous thing from. And I would just be like, yeah, I'm going to just be an artist. And everybody would tell me, you're going to starve, and then with my grades and being kicked out of school, all these different things, they didn't know what to do with me pretty much. But once I got kicked out of school, they introduced me to one of the art teachers, who then told me about Ryman Arts, like this new program that had just started. And
wait, real quick, what were you drawing as a kid?
One of my first memories is like of drawing is putting 4 pieces of lined paper together to draw a whale, because the whale was so big, right? It couldn't be contained by one piece.
You couldn't make a smaller whale.
It had to be. So for me, it was already like conceptual. I was like, no, it has to be on 4 sheets, right? And then also my mom being like, no, you have to draw it smaller because you're wasting paper. So then even that, like this idea of wasting materials, that really stuck with me. I must have been like 3 years old or something.
Wow.
And so even though my dad would bring home some supplies once, because he worked at a school, and so stuff would get thrown out and bring stuff, I still would be like, oh, like it has to be something really great for me to justify using this material. Which is, I'm still that way. But anyways, but I never really stopped. I never stopped, and and I throughout my life I would draw and find something creative to do.
Did you draw like let's say like sixth grade stuff for girls, seventh grade,
Oh, the
stuff
flowers,
that?
like
Yeah,
the
did you do
roses.
anything like that? Did you
Oh
do
yeah.
lowrider cars, or did you do like
Well, yeah, because
satanic stuff? I don't know.
nah, because growing up in right there in the neighborhood, I mean, and there was some beautiful murals around,
Mhm.
that were from the Chicano movement, and I could never find out who painted them.
Mhm.
And I tried, and they're all gone now. And I've tried researching this, which is really sad.
Yeah.
And it was like, I remember right across the way from my house, there was
70s brought us so many beautiful murals that are now gone. Yeah.
yeah, which leads into why I do the work with the collective. I remember being like right across the street. There was like like Zapata and other soldiers, and as kids we would stand next to them, like try to measure our height next to these soldados, right? And
That's
and
bad.
things like that. And then there was all, of course, like the graffiti, these huge old English placazo, like these big,
Yeah, the way they used to do the letters with the old English little tails and
yeah,
yeah, it
yeah,
was
just
they were
beautiful.
massive.
Just one day you walk outside and there's this giant old
Yeah.
English piece, and that was really influential.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all the hand styles, all that stuff. That was the first artwork I really saw. So I would mimic that, and then also Teen Angels,
Oh yeah, I used to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah,
The,
well, my
the
uncle-
shading, right?
yeah, the ballpoint pen
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
like that was all I would really do.
That's badass.
So I learned how to kind of copy that style, and that was basically it. Until when was it? Somewhere in my teenage years, finally I got to go to a museum and see different things, and
Do you remember the museum?
I think the first museum I ever visited was LACMA.
Okay.
And it wasn't until probably I must have been 18.
That was the first museum I went to, and I still remember the Volkswagen. It was like an installation art piece with the Volkswagen with the beer bottles lying around and
Yeah.
the door open. Like
Hmm. And I can't remember the name of the artist right now,
but it's a very popular piece. Yeah, I can't remember the
Yeah.
name either, but I remember seeing it again as an adult, going, "Oh, I saw that when I was a kid," because
Yeah.
it's still in their collection. But
yeah, one of the first pieces that really resonated with me was Ruben Ortiz Torres, his leaf blowers. And I saw that later on, but it was the first time that I could really project myself into a space like LACMA.
yeah,
Just seeing that work, which then came full circle where I ended up working with Ruben and became a good friend of mine.
nice.
But anyways, yeah, there's a lot that happened
So
between.
tell me about the
all that.
group again, or the program that you got into, the
Oh yeah, so going back to Ryman Arts,
Ryman Arts.
I owe a lot to Ryman Arts. There were
So
there
this
were
is
new
a
programs.
young Oscar, just
15-year-old
got kicked out of school.
just got kicked out of
Like-
school, and it turns out it was like the best thing that could have happened to me, because then I had to do independent studies, which was much better for me than being in this classroom, which was super disruptive. And I got to pretty much for history just read pretty much college textbooks on like Mexican history, different things. So it was kind of just independent studies that I was doing, and then I got to get art classes. And another thing that they did was they stuck me in. Azusa did a funny thing where they grouped all the kindergartens together into one, and so they had me half of the day working in the kindergarten with all these 5-year-olds, which was amazing for like the rest of the year. And then had art classes, and then had independent studies. So I mean, it really changed the trajectory of my life. It turned out it felt like I had like 8 mothers.
So
They were all those kindergarten teachers were looking out for me, and then the assistant superintendent was looking out for me. So she would come pick me up every day from school, and then take me to the kindergarten, and she's like driving the Benz. And I remember like it was funny because I learned a lot about politics too, where people like these teachers and administrators, they were all playing politics. So
Yeah.
sometimes I'd walk into an office and they're like, "Oh, it must be nice to be driven around by Nancy," and I'm a kid, and like, and then I start understanding these, like, how complex things are.
positions.
Yeah.
Because as a kid, I remember everybody who ran like any nonprofit had a fancy ass car like that, just like you're saying.
Yeah.
Like you would always see the head guy with like a Mercedes or a BMW back then.
Well,
Wow.
the nonprofit Ryman Arts was founded by Marty Sklar, the Prices, Buzz and Ann Price, and who else was it? It was friends of Herbert Ryman, and Herbert Ryman was the one of the first guys that Disney hired. So the first concept drawing for Disney that was done like over a weekend to present to some bankers was done by Herbert Ryman. And when he passed away, they set up this, and he would teach a lot. And so he would do, just traditional drawing and painting classes and would work with Imagineers over at Disney. So the Sklar's and then the Prices and I forget who else set up this nonprofit to teach art classes. And it was all merit based. So I submitted and I got rejected the first time. And then I got, the second time I went, submitted, I got accepted. And there was some great people that were running the program. And it was really amazing to me that, because it was a full scholarship and you get, your boxes with all your art supplies. And this was the first time I had like legit art supplies. And
so as far as programming though, what did they do for you? Like how did they?
So it's a 1.5-year program. And anyone who's in high school who's interested in art, I would highly recommend the program.
It still exists.
It still exists, and it's huge now. It started with 15 students. And so Barbara Thompson was, who is an amazing artist and was one of the first people who worked at Gemini also. But and was actually when Cal Poly Pomona had a print program, she was the head of that department, of that program. But anyways, that was my first real art teacher. And so it was great, just traditional drawing, everything, that you would learn, almost like old school drafting. How do you learn how to really render something?
So they took you and they gave you like your high school classes. They put you in like the independent studies and they gave you the art lessons.
So yeah, so when I got kicked out, right? So now I had to do independent studies. I had to then do work with the kids, and then on the weekends I would go out to the old Otis, like when it was over by
MacArthur Park.
By MacArthur Park, right? Like the Charles White
high school. It was a beautiful building. When I was a kid, I'd pass by it.
Yeah, so that's where I was for a 1.5 years. Every weekend I would go out there and have art classes, which was really interesting because then I'm projecting myself into an art program as a high school student. And so, yeah, and then that led to a whole lot of other opportunities when I got older.
Did you end up ever getting your high school diploma?
Yes. Yeah, because I was back in school with them like too. It's funny. The principal made assumptions about me and hated me. Just thought I was like some kind of,
because you were walking in with like your Chuck Taylors and your Baggy Dickies, or what happened?
He was just a racist dude who looked like Clint Eastwood, man.
Oh yeah,
like
God,
had the flat top, kind of ex-military, probably.
God,
like
that's funny. Like the dad in American Me. No, I'm in America. Well, damn it, America, the Beautiful one. Anyways, I'm gonna cut that whole part because I messed up. What is that movie, Chris?
What movie?
Beautiful America, America Beautiful.
American Beauty?
With Kevin Spacey. Yeah, American Beauty.
American Beauty.
Yeah, American Beauty. That's what I meant to say.
Well, anyways, this guy just made assumptions about me and hated me, and it was funny because then Nancy had told me, I'll get you back in school," and I was like, he's never gonna take me, and like he hates me, and she goes, "I'll get you back in. He owes me a favor," and I was like, "Damn, like that." And sure enough,
Politics,
like within the like 2 months of me being expelled, I was back in school.
Damn.
So I finished up, and but then there wasn't much for me to do after.
Did you go to Otis after that?
No. So that was the thing is, again.
Wait, at this point, yeah, you were not working as an artist yet. You were still just high school kid trying to finish school and all that.
Yep.
So how did you end up going to college and or where did the art take you after that?
So I was doing a lot of classes over at Mount Sac at that time because I was still living in Azusa, and I wasn't, again, right, the counselors were terrible, and there's no one helping me as far as trying to figure things out. So I'm just knocking out all these classes, but and this is even before the internet, really, right? Yeah, we still have to hand write everything, and so with my learning disability, I couldn't do my English or my math that I needed to transfer into university. So I did every class I could as far as art. I met really a lot of great artists, and and got a art studio.
Wait, where were you taking these classes?
This was at Mount San Antonio
Oh,
College
Mount
in
Sac,
Walnut.
yeah.
Yeah, and so then, God, there's so much that's happened. So
I
then,
mean, that's another thing too. Like all these community colleges have great art programs. Like if you're an artist and you're like wondering if you should go to art school or whatever, and you're just sitting around, like just start at a community college and just get busy learning, right?
yeah,
Because eventually you did end up going to UCLA.
I did.
Yeah.
And really,
So how
they
was
did a
that
study.
path?
I mean, they did and this was just random. I met the person who was conducting the study once I was at UCLA, who said that math class that you need to transfer, and I think they've changed the requirements, but that kept like 90-something% of the people out of higher education, that one class, because so many people just for whatever reason don't reach that level of math, for your get or whatever it is. And so I mean, long story short, so I'm doing this, I give up on it, being able to transfer, because I can't do my math or English, right? And I'm already creating work. I have a studio in the Arts Colony in Pomona. I end up moving there. I have a daughter when I'm 22, right? And so then
did you figure out already that you could make money from art at that time? Were you already like
so
productive as an art business?
So since everybody was telling me that I was going to starve as an artist, they're like, do graphic design. So I did. I went into graphic design, studied visual communications, and for the next 15 years, pretty much did graphic design. Worked for a printing company, small printing company in La Puente that's not even there anymore. But I learned all kinds of different types of printing, which really influenced my work a lot. And I mean, eventually I put it all together because I'd spent so much time working with the programs and working with just the way that we do color separations or color theory, or even this idea of decentralization, right? But anyway, so I do that, and let's see, doing a lot of work, and it's always had the intention of just being an independent artist. Always had that, where I knew that was what I was going to do, and be a professional artist. So I'm always working towards kind of that financial independence. And so once, it must have been around 2000, man, so much. So I have my studio in the Arts Colony, right? And so while I'm there, I'm, curate a few shows, sell some work. And Gilbert Magoo Lujan had a studio there, and he became a mentor of mine. And so that's when he really started doing like the mental menudos at the Mexican Culture Institute, and that led to me doing like the Chicano Art magazine just for like a year, and then it fell apart because of the owner, or whatever. I mean, there was just differences there, which I wish I could have just kept that going. But anyways, so then there's that going on. So then we're exhibiting, we're doing different things, we're organizing shows with really amazing people. But also what was it? It must have been around 2003 when one of my pieces got shown at, I put it into the Day of the Dead show at Self-Help, and everybody loved it. And so I got invited to then be part of Terce Terce, which is where I really met everybody. Everybody from like, I don't know, Germs and, Retna and Melly and all these other people, Chizu, they were all in that show. So that was kind of when I really met everybody in LA. And I met Chaz also, who ended up, an amazing individual who just is really open. So gave me a lot of good advice when I was really starting out.
Speaking of that advice too, I want to just take it back a little bit to like just the fact that you moved into an art colony where you didn't know who Gilbert Magoo was, but then you got to meet him, then you got to know him. So like having mentorships like that, how important has that been?
It's invaluable. Yeah. I mean, and he's missed greatly, because there's these veteranos, like they're very open. There's few people now. It feels as if a lot of people hold things really close to their chest, like it's
what they call gatekeepers.
Yeah, there's gatekeepers. There's all these things going on, but I think we've lost a lot of things that have to do with mentorship. Where I'm not saying that everything our elders or veteranos tell us is true, but we we can distill a lot of things from their experiences, because the world changes very quickly. And so there is a lot of knowledge that should be passed down, and then there's things that need to be discarded, and there's also things that we need to change in our elders, right? So the flow of information isn't just one way. There's these conversations we have to have, and that's one of the reasons why I really decided to work with the collective also, right? There's I think a 20-year difference between me and the youngest guy in the collective, and to me that's very important, because I could see also with some of the things that I would hear, there were these lessons that we had to learn, not just in success but also in what could we have done better, right? Like what people oftentimes don't speak about, right? They're too busy talking about the wins to really share the knowledge that comes from something that didn't work, right?
Yeah.
And so that to me is important also, as far as being able to distill some of that from people who came before us.
Explain a little bit, now that you've introduced the collective. Take us to that point right now where you've started this collective, or you're part of this collective.
Well, okay, so now just to keep it in a linear way. So in 2007, I quit my job, my day job, because I was working, doing freelance jobs, but also doing a lot of shows, a lot of exhibitions, and so did that. And and then of course it was perfect timing, because then the market crashes, and then it was, a lot of struggling for a while, which sounds familiar, I'm sure, to a lot of people with the pandemic. But so then I have my studio right there in Lincoln Heights, which we still have, and just that was it. I was working full time as an artist, and somehow figured it out. Whatever it was, making deals, doing it myself, selling work out of the studio and producing work and producing shows, and just putting myself out there. And at some point I realized,
what kind of work do you think you did the most during that time, where you were just hustle?
Well, I like working in bodies of work. So I really like doing solo exhibitions, because then I could work in bodies of works where there's themes that I would go back to. A lot of things that have just had to do with the struggle, everyday themes, and everything from, paleteros to labor, unseen labor, all these different things that I've been touching on since 2003. Well, actually, and another thing that was a big deal was of course 9/11, right? Where I was doing very different work before that, and then I realized after seeing all this like xenophobic kind of insane rhetoric that was coming about it by 2003, I decided to do nothing but political work. And to me, it was a direct kind of reaction to that language that was coming out, and how it was very much being used as to target immigrants, and that was just people in my community, right? And so I wanted to be very deliberate in what it is that I was doing, and also knowing that I had these connections to people like, I don't know, Ryman and Marty Sklar and all these different things. So I was interweaving all this work that I was doing, where I was volunteering, and I ended up on the board of directors with Ryman Arts like 15 years after I went. Well, maybe not that, like 10 years after I was in the program. I think I was still in my 20s, and then ended up on the board with Self Graphics, and then working with Inner City Arts. And to me, that was very important to do that part of the work, because that's what made the biggest difference in my life, programs like that. And so I know how important that was. So just moving ahead, doing this work, doing these solo shows, but I felt like at some point I hit, or I plateaued, right? And I realized that a lot of things I felt as if I was doing something wasn't really much. There's plenty of artists in the community, right? And there's no shortage of it. And to me, I wanted to do something different, and I wanted to make sure that the work was doing the work that I wanted it to do. And to do that, I had to be in a conversation with different communities, not just mine. And so that's when I met my partner, and she told me, if you want to do these things, if you're serious about wanting to do these things, you're going to have to go back to school. And I laughed and said, that's never going to happen. And she told me, what is it going to take for you to go back to school?
That's awesome.
And at that point, I didn't know she had worked as a
just
as
asking
a
the
counselor.
question is like,
Yeah.
It's so simple sometimes. I mean, go on though. Yeah.
No, yeah, and so she actually matriculated people. So
Yeah.
she just said, "Well, go get your transcripts," and I got them, and she's like, "I'll get you in school." And she's like, "What's it going to take for you to go back to school?" And I said, "It has to be UCLA, and it has to be a full ride." And then she goes, "Okay," and I had no idea what I was talking about at that point.
Yeah.
And so I applied. And she told me what I had to do, and immediately went to ELAC and enrolled and then tested, and I scored way low in my math, and it was just like there was no way I was going to be able to get to where I needed to be able to transfer, even though I didn't tell UCLA that, right?
Yeah.
So then, because I needed to take like 3 classes of math in a matter of like 6 months.
Is, just so I understand. Because I didn't get far in math myself.
Oh, and that was super basic math. Like I couldn't even do like proper division, like of fraction, stuff like that.
Wow.
But it turns out that she's like, go get tested, and so she's the one that was like, you're definitely dyslexic. And she's like, not only you're dyslexic, you have this dyscalculia, which I hadn't even heard of.
I never heard of that. Dyscalculia.
So I flip numbers and letters. And so with algebra, if there's like a 5 and an F in it, I'll flip them. And so it was almost impossible for me to do it. So that those basically 6 months, where after I applied and then I'm doing my math, I went from basic math to quadratic equations in 6 months. Like basically everything I should have learned, I did it in 6 months, and most of it was done online. And when it would keep track of how much time you spent on there, when I did the math, I was averaging 12 hours a day on math, and it took that much sacrifice to like be able to do it. And finally, it came back. I was accepted into UCLA, the program, and I remember how upset I was. I remember I was in the middle of math.
Why were you upset?
And I was in because I'm stressed out so much over this math, right? And I'm literally, I would wake up and I would get on the computer and I would do math, and they would bring me food to the table. Like that was it. That was my life, for 6 months. And so now, before this, there was no expectation of me going to school. And then when I got accepted, I was like, now the weight on my shoulders to pass this class is not only just passing this class, it's I can lose this, like my place at UCLA because I don't pass this class. Wow. And I remember I was just like, so now I had to, like, not that I didn't feel that I had to before, but it was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life. And even then, I didn't get to the math I needed to transfer in, and so I had to call them and tell them, like, when I passed that class, I was like, there isn't enough time for me to do another class. And they're like, ooh, like the people in admission, they're like, we'll call you back. And I was like, damn it, again. I was all upset. And they're like, we'll call you back in like half an hour. They called me back 3 days later. Wow. And the person in admissions said, they must really want you. Bro, I've been here 8 years. I've never seen them make an exception like this. Wow. They're like, they must really want you. And then my partner was like, I told you there's always exceptions. She's all, so many people come out of our programs and are not going to be artists. They're all, you are already an artist. You're a professional artist, and that's what you're always going to do. You're going to make the program look good.
Yeah, exactly.
And
they needed you.
I mean, I don't, me, little old me from the neighborhood.
No, it's true, but that's something that it takes us a while to learn sometimes, that they need us as much as we need them sometimes, if not more sometimes,
Yeah. But I mean, there's so many different, and that's the exposure, right? Yeah. Nobody, I never even
we don't know these things.
I really didn't understand. I didn't really understand who Barbara Kruger was. I didn't understand who so many of the faculty members were, because I didn't even know. I didn't know that history. I knew so much of like our own history when it comes to like art and Chicanos and, Chiripaca, like all these different things, but I didn't really understand the larger kind of context of how we were trying to exist within the larger kind of contemporary art world. And so, then here I am, probably the oldest guy in the undergrad program at UCLA. And also I didn't know that if you make under like, I don't know, 70,000, your household income is less than 70,000, you get a full ride. and I didn't know that. And at the time I think it was 50, but I think they raised it now to 70. And it's called like the blue and gold, and I'm putting it out there for anybody who thinks that they can afford it, like
Give it a shot.
yeah, look into it. But why don't we know these things, right? But anyway, so I ended up going there, and it was amazing. I mean, it was amazing. It was difficult, but I'm glad that I did it while I was older. I mean, this was in 2013 when I started, and I was asking a lot of hard questions because they were still teaching us. We had to do, mandatory. We had to do a year of modernism, and the way we were being taught was where art really revolved around these white male artists, and that was very difficult for a lot of BIPOC students to how do we react to these things, right? Like when we're talking about the happenings in the same way that we're talking about the freedom riders, right? Like as far as importance, especially at that time. And so it was really interesting, to say the least, as far as being able to quickly kind of grasp what was going on at that time, and have these difficult conversations and ask these questions. I had quite a few PhD students upset at me, but
why? Just because you kept asking the questions, or
well, because it's very
a lot of
easy
times they just don't want to bother with the question.
No, it's easy to poke holes in some of these arguments, because there's a deficit there where there's a lot of things that are not part of that conversation, and so when it comes to like how do you reconcile what's going on with the civil rights movement with the canon of modern art or contemporary art, right? Like there isn't that much of a discussion. I mean, I'm sure there's a ton of theses and books written about it, but everyday folks, what do we understand? What was more important, right? Like this artwork that was being made, or these assassinations, or like Angela, like all these different things, right? Like how do those things they coexist, right, in time and the way that we learn history, but there's a deficit there as far as us writing that history also, right? Like the Chicano movement, and the work that was being produced at that time, how does that exist within the contemporary world, or within these histories, because nobody's writing those histories, right? Like now we're having people that are doing kind of these exhibitions that we talk about all these things, but in the larger sense of U.S. history, those are blips, right? And so again, when you're existing in these very academic kind of settings in these institutions, these are conversations that I wanted to have. How do these things relate to each other? Because that speaks more to my life and my experience than just some overly academic. I don't know. I mean, there's a ton of ways that we could talk about art, but when you're in these settings, there's that art talk, right? There's and so, and UCLA was one of like the home bases of that. Like, I mean, somebody who was very generous with me while I was there was Larry Pittman and Barbara Kruger, right? And so it was great to have those conversations and to be able to talk about politics within the context of contemporary art, and how I fit into the scope of things, and how my history and experiences could be expressed.
Did UCLA help give you those tools too, like to speak in art talk and to speak in like neighborhood talk and to speak in just homie, I mean, that code switching, did it refine some of that also, like the art talk for you? Did it help you with that, or?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I would get more from talking to Larry Pittman in half an hour than I would from, so many other people. Just it was great to just have people who really cared about what it is that you were producing, and to really sit there and be so knowledgeable, and them be able to make the connections for you that you didn't even know were there. Just the relationships to different, so many different artists, and so then to be able to place yourself amongst that, but still help you have your independent identity as far as what is unique in the work, and that push and pull. And so not just the way we would speak about the work, but also being able to propel the work forward as far as what work do I want the work to do, right? And to be able to kind of get it and really hone it into what it is that I was doing. And I think what almost on my way out of UCLA, I discovered some writings that really helped place my work in a context that wasn't so much about it being reactionary, but being more about almost autobiographical, but from a place that was independent of just this very European Western way of looking at art, and that was very important to me.
I think I'm going to remember that sentence for a long time. What work do I want my work to do? Because, yeah, and it not being just reactionary, not just like, here's an answer, but also like, what is it going to do? Or, how, yeah, is it doing the work that I want it to do?
Yeah.
That's a deep question to ask about your own work, you know? Because, I mean, personally, myself, I just shoot randomly and then put things together. And sometimes I also have other people that put it in a context. I'm like, damn, I never saw that. It's beautiful. But to start with that question, it's pretty heavy.
Well, that's something that's very powerful about photography. I mean, every medium has its own strengths, and there's other mediums that, I mean, there's almost like a Venn diagram, right, of like what you can do with each medium. But photography only gains importance with time, right, and perspective. And we all have these different, you know, I don't believe in one single worldview, and I definitely don't believe that kind of this Western way of looking at things and you know, the grand enlightenment that everything could be reduced to one answer. That's just not the way the world works. We have different experiences, and because of that we have different worldviews, and because of that we can interpret things a different way. And it isn't even about code switching. Sometimes it's really about holding people at arm's length, you know, because that work isn't necessarily made for you. You know, there's and it could be the same work where something you do relate to, but there's other parts of the work that you're never going to fully understand because you haven't had that experience. You didn't grow up in the neighborhood. You didn't see people getting shot. Like, there's these things that are for them, you know, for the people who went through a lot of that. And that's why I think it's important also to do other work besides the work, because the work in itself can't do everything. That's why I think it's important to work with nonprofits. That's why I think it's important to try to mentor and work with, you know, people who are younger than you, and really try to be deliberate about those things.
What do you think like was the changes from, like, I mean, first you were, you know, young Oscar who was just fucking around, and then you got into the Ryman program, and then you were like already a known artist and you were doing work, and then you got into UCLA, and then, you know, you finished that. How do you feel coming out of that? How did all that change you or help you grow?
It's like the story of the eagle, right? That has to pluck out its feathers and, you know, break its beak. You know that?
I don't know the story, no.
Yeah, it's a long story, but I mean, it's this idea of reinvention, right? And it's painful. It's something that's very, very much, you know, that you could observe in nature, and it's an old story. But anyways, but I know that I've very purposely have reinvented myself, and it's not something that was easy. It's very much parts of me had to be killed off, had to die, and I probably suffered from like this multiple personality disorder where there was so much trauma, there was so much going on that I compartmentalized a lot of my mind, and totally messed up my certain parts of my brain because there was so much stress going on, and I would have these different personalities kick in depending on what's going on, and I'm always hyper vigilant because that's just something that always happens. And so it's always this state of stress that I have to put myself in, which is very unhealthy. And so getting to the root of these things, especially when, and this is another thing that goes back to mental health, there's so very few competent, culturally competent therapists. And this goes back to the same thing that has to do with systemic racism. How do we get people from our community through these programs and through these institutions who have the shared experiences? And how do we get them past their traumas too, right? Like where you know it firsthand. And that's why I really appreciate the work that my partner does. Is really, she's probably gotten, you know, a lot of people licensed at this point. We're really helping them move forward as far as being able to then become full-on therapist. But I had to do that hard work on my own. When I was in my 20s, I had to sit down and think, why am I being so self-destructive? What is it? What is making me really so angry, right? And being able to pretty much reprogram yourself, right? And take a different path, and it's difficult. It was difficult to do that, and for a
Not
long
just the
time.
work that the school requires, but the work that you did on
The
yourself.
personal work that I had to do to myself,
Yeah.
you know, and that's not easy. It's not easy to rewire yourself, and it's possible. You could really rewire your brain, because there's different. I mean, anybody who's done psychedelics, or you know, but I mean, you could rewire your brain, and
Traumatic experiences rewire your brain. You could also try
Yeah.
to get to that place
yeah.
yourself.
So
Yeah.
I was lucky enough that I was able to do that and sit down and really get rid of a lot of things, a lot of stuff, and it was a long process, but it really felt almost, you know, at the point when I did it, it felt like a light switch, you know, where I was able to just let things go, and then I had to reinvent myself a few more times. Again, there were a lot of sacrifice. School was not easy. That I had to rewire my brain to do math, where I was able to do that because I was able to circumvent the wiring in my brain that was misfiring, to where I did it so much that it became hardwired, where it was muscle memory. You know, I conditioned myself to do the math, and that's the only way I was able to do it. I had to do it so much that it circumvented that sharp, like, but these things are painful. Like they really feels like part of you is dying, and it's happened, you know, where there was, you know, these other things going on in my head, right? Like I'm having these conversations with, you know, these 3 or 4 other people in my head, and they're doing stuff, and it's like a beehive, right? Where there's all these thoughts going on, and then once I get to UCLA, they start to get real quiet, you know, and we're having these very difficult conversations, and it's probably my brain healing itself or whatever it is, but it feels as if part of me is dying, right? Like, and so it's almost like there's a grieving process that I had to go through, and then, you know, when I was there at UCLA, just because I know we're probably short on time now, I met a lot of you know, not a lot, but there was a few Latinos and indigenous, you know, Chicanos that were in the program, and 5 of us got together, and you know, once the program was over, and we were lucky enough that LAX came knocking, and Hamza Walker asked us to do this incredibly complex installation at LAX, and I asked the guys, like, hey, do you guys want to do this? And
that's how the group started, huh?
And that's how the group started. And we've painted LAX I don't know how many times at this point, but basically every public art piece there, including Barbara Kruger's, we did. But that funded, you know, part of our projects, and we cut our teeth doing that because none of us had painted murals before, and so we figured it out, and that's what we did. And Tom's is a good friend now, and you know, we're proud that we got to work with Barbara Kruger and so many other, you know, artists. And then we also made the decision for all of us to do our MFAs and at different institutions so that we could build different networks. And one of the collective members went to Yale, the other VCU, and one of the other members is at UCSD right now, and starting his 2nd year doing his MFA. And I went to UCSD also, finished up last year my MFA. And so while all this is going on, you know, we're just, you know, checking off those boxes.
Wow, dude, that's badass.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fucking work.
Yeah, but now
that's a lot of fucking work. Yeah.
We're I mean, it's the first time in my life that I don't feel like I'm playing catch up.
Yeah. Wow. Congratulations and all that. I
Thank
mean,
you.
I'm mind blown right now. I didn't even know you finished your MFA. So
yeah, I like to keep things quiet until I'm done.
Oh, that's good, man.
I mean, that's just the way I operate. One of the things that I've never understood is envy, you know, and I'd rather just keep things quiet while I'm working on them until I'm done, and then I'd rather just have the celebration than the hating, you know?
Yeah. So as a group now, what is your purpose or what is your goal as a group? I mean, so you guys paint murals.
We paint murals, but we've been focusing on institutions. The thing is that with erasure, gentrification, all these different things, and we all come from different parts of Los Angeles. I'm the only one that's from, you know, San Gabriel Valley, but I was living in El Sereno for about 10 years. and I have had my studio in Lincoln Heights for about 12 years, and last year I handed it off to the guys, and was able to finally get a house. So got a tiny home in Pomona, and so been working out of there, and there's a lot. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about the environment and what it really means to produce individual work. So I've been focusing on the public work, the whole collective. That's what we've been doing, coming together to do works that we can't do on our own. So doing some big pieces. I mean, we've done with Cal State Stanislaus. We've done 2 pieces for UCLA. We're about to do one for UCSD. We're working on a huge one for the Hilda Solis Care First Village over on Vignes. We're going to be doing that campus. I personally am working on the metro station for Century City.
Yeah, you got the new metro station too. Yeah. I saw that.
Yeah. And then just doing that. And to me, it's very important to do public work that's not going to be erased, and that's working within the institution, because we want to insert ourselves. It's not just about kind of getting our way in the door, but also how do we keep that door open? How do we take space? How do we hold space? And how do we work with the community to create these works too?
Are all of these public works things that you guys like apply and you have to be selected, or are they calling you?
It's been both. Some of it's been word of mouth, but a lot of it has been applying.
Yeah.
Oh, we just got 2 more for Pomona too.
Wow.
But anyways, yeah, we stay busy. We apply, and it's good working as a group, because then at this point, it's becoming a well-oiled machine where
you know who handles what.
Yeah. So there's different people that are applying for different projects, and then they become the lead on the project. So in that way, everyone's learning also how to do things and how to be the lead on the project. So we're all getting that experience of doing public art, because we're all individual artists as well.
Wow. Yeah. That's badass.
Yeah.
What's the next project that you're doing right now?
For the collective?
Yeah.
Up next is probably UCSD, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where you went.
That's where we went. So we're going to be painting the visual arts facility, which is next to the new amphitheater and the trolley that's opening.
How's it been like being back in Pomona?
My parents have lived there for the last 15 years, and my grandmother lived there, and my uncle, and a lot of family has lived there my entire life.
Back in the days, I would hear like little hints of like the art colony where you said you lived. I would hear about that, but now it's pretty vibrant, right? As far as the art community. Yes or no?
I mean, there's this. There was a good time there when we were all out there, and Magoo was there, and there must have been like, I think 23 galleries and art spots within 4 blocks, and I haven't seen anything else like that ever again. And so there's a lot going on. There's the vendors, there's all this, but it was very different where an artist could have a shop, with a gallery and a loft for like under $1,000, so being able to survive as an artist, doing all the, it was different. It was different times.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a 5,500 square foot spot that we shared with 2 other people, and we were paying $200 a person.
Wow.
I mean, it was humongous. And so we would do these great shows, and it was different. It was very bohemian, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
And
kind of like the arts district here used to be.
Yeah, and that's what happens, right?
It's horrible now.
And the arts district without artists, right?
Yeah, there's no artists in there anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, there must be a few in there, but it's not an art district like it used to be.
Right.
Well, we are winding down to the last minutes. Is there anything else that you would like to share that we didn't get to?
I don't know.
Where can people find you?
Hopefully they can't. Keep my head down.
Instagram, website.
Instagram. I'm never on Facebook anymore.
Yeah.
Just the whole data collection thing. I'm good. I don't need
Yeah.
to add to that anymore. But I'm on Instagram, and I'm easy to find. My website
At Nimeshika or something.
Yeah, at Nimeshika is my Instagram, my handle.
And your website is oscarmagallanes.com.
Yeah, and if that's too complicated, you could go to oscartheartist.com and it'll send you there, or Nimeshika also.
Oscar the artist. All right, cool.
Yeah.
And there's a question that we ask everybody at the end of every show, and it's a very simple question, and we ask if you can try to answer in 1 sentence. It's a very vague question, so you can answer in any way you want. But if you had to answer if somebody just came up to you and just saw all of your work and saw everything that you do and they just said, Oscar, how do you do it?
And of course, I already forgot. I had an answer, and now I can't remember what it was.
I saw your eyes light up when I brought it up. I was like,
There's the way I do it, and I don't recommend this for anyone, is a certain balance between naiveness and being fearless.
that's good. A certain balance between naiveness and being fearless.
Yeah.
I like
mean,
that a lot.
keep good company. That's a better answer. Like, just
I like both of those.
yeah. But I mean, yeah, I attribute a lot to me not knowing how difficult something was going to be, and I'm just have dogged determination to keep going with it.
I like that. Well, thank you so much for coming here,
Yeah, muchas
sharing with
gracias.
us a lot about your life and your story. Really proud of everything that you're doing. So excited for what's happening with you guys and all your future projects that are coming up. And that's it.
No,
We'll
thank
see you
you
guys
very
next
much.
week.